Just to remind you, there are three main versions of simulation. There is a materialistic one where every person living is a non-player character. There is something that created this world, all the way down to molecules. The matter exists in this simulated world, and we just interact with it and live within it. We don't exist outside of this simulation. So that's materialistic. Then there is Matrix-like world where minds exist outside of this world, and within this world we are just avatars for those minds, and everyone is a player character. And then there is a mixed version where there are some non-player characters, so just simulated beings, simulated minds within the simulation, and some of us might be minds that exist outside of simulation but represented as avatars. So there's three main versions. Let's spice it up a little bit. Here is a more imaginative version of the same. So we have a Matrix-like simulation where we could be asleep and we could be utilized for various purposes. Just for fun here, there is some being that uses our body parts as delicacies, as something tasty. Because I did see some versions saying that we are simulated just to utilize our bodies. But unlike in Matrix, it's used for energy, but which is kind of far-fetched. The other reason could be food. But of course, simulating complex minds like ours makes only sense if we are really like a delicacy, because it's much easier to just grow some bacteria and eat it, so then simulate the whole world for humans. Then we have a materialistic version representing like kind of Minecraft within Minecraft kind of joke. And then we have a mixed version where there is somebody connected from outside and controls plays in this world, and we are just all these non-player characters for that real player. So these are the basic three versions of simulation, but it doesn't explain the reasons why simulation might exist. That's what we will try to explore in this video. I would like to point out that number of versions can be pretty much infinite. To illustrate that, let me show you a small program. This simple program illustrates how many versions we can generate. So we have some versions of controllers like this. God, a genius, human civilization, aliens, me, AI. We could extend this list further. Then we have basic descriptions of the controllers like good, evil, distant, meaning like somewhere far away, not dealing too much with our simulation, or crazy, or typical. And then we have actions like play, torture, test, create and forget, utilize. And we'll do all these permutations in this nested for each loop, and randomize and print it out. So as you can see, we got 150 combinations just with these basic ones, and it could be like evil AI torture people in our world, good aliens created and forgot people in our world, typical aliens torture people in our world, distant genius torture people in our world, and so on. So you can get a lot of different versions here, and it's kind of only a simple sentence with three predicates, three components permutated, but if you build a longer sentence, it will quickly become infinite. There is a link at the bottom of this video for this full list if you want to explore it and find the most likely version that you like. When we ask a question of what is the reason for our simulation to exist, it inevitably boils down to the question, who is our creator? So let's explore that a little bit. Philosophers long ago classified all kinds of gods and gave them hard to pronounce terms. So first of all, we're already familiar with pantheism, which is God encompasses the whole world, and essentially a world is inseparable from God figure. Then we have deism, where God is like distant God. He created this world and doesn't want to deal with it anymore. Then we have polytheism, where there are many gods that might be present in this world or be outside. Then we have this thing that I cannot even pronounce, where God is both evil and good at the same time. Then we have this one, which is God is definitely evil. And then we have detheism, which means there are two gods, one is good, one is evil. Then of course there is always assumption that you might be God and everything you see is just for you personally. Every other human is just creation of your own mind. Later in this video I will try to separate the most likely explanation for the God out of these versions. Besides God, there are three main categories of versions that I saw on internet. And the first category is I call illogical. Philosopher Aristotle introduced a very important assumption that any fact cannot be true and false at the same time. But what if that is not the case? Then there are plenty of versions that kind of fit into this category. First of all, we could have evil, good God that tortures and loves humans. So you have kind of opposite things within one sentence, within one predicate. It's possible if we remove that assumption from Aristotle. We don't exist and live. Another one, Bible versions, if we assume that Bible is directly written by God and not humans who introduce some imperfections in Bible, if we just think as Bible as perfectly written by God's book, then it's also falls into this category because it is full of controversies and true-false phenomena. Black holes are kind of dual in nature because according to theory we can get inside of the black hole because of the huge gravity, but on the other hand time slows down infinitely when you get very close to the black hole, so you will never get inside of black hole. It will be very slow. So it's kind of contradiction within the physics itself, true-false contradiction. Then we have Schrödinger's cat example where cat can be dead and alive at the same time. So it sounds like true-false thing, and Aristotle's assumption might not after all be true for this world. And then illogical versions of simulation actually can be plausible. Then a whole list of other versions. Humans, again, very imaginative. We imagined a lot of reasons for simulation to exist. And I call this category far-fetched. They're all very unlikely for if we use a tool from philosophy called Occam's razor, which is essentially a rule in philosophy that the most likely explanation for something is the simplest one. It tends to be the case just statistically. Some far-fetched explanation, as example one, first you probably recognize. You lost war to AI and closed Earth from the sun, so AI uses us as an energy source. That's matrix, right? Very far-fetched. Another one would be some kind of multiple dimensions and no time thing even in existence, so like multi-dimensional beings controlling the world, and maybe time doesn't even doesn't exist in itself. For example, we could imagine that we are just part of some huge mathematical equations where time is just a variable, and this mathematical equation describes the whole universe, and it is solved already. Therefore, everything is predetermined. There is no like time in that case, and it doesn't matter. We could imagine something like that easily. Then another version would be God dreaming, and we are part of his dream. The next one is just a boy is playing a game on one of millions of other PlayStations of the future, and this whole world that we live in is just this one game. He can save it when he goes to bed, load it again. We just don't notice when we get saved, when we get loaded. Some gamers play it for so long that we forgot that this is a game. Well, some godlike beings started playing it played for a long time, forgot they, and then that's what we are. When we babies, we have blurred memories, so we don't remember exact transition. Everything is possible. Again, everything is possible. Just question of how probable it is. And another version is would be punishment to higher beings to live through life on this planet. So it's like a prison for somebody from other world. So that's far-fetched explanations. Again, there is a huge amount of them, and maybe not infinite, but really big number. And then unknown explanations, things that we simply don't know about outside world. And this category is infinite pretty much, so there is no sense to even explore that. Those of you who watched my other videos probably know how I love multiverse theory. So what I noticed when people mention multiverse in Twitter, first of all, it's much more popular than simulation theory, which is really ridiculous because multiverse is a very funny theory. But if you read the posts and context where people use multiverse, it's almost always to hide the need for accountability for a person's actions or hide insecurities, if you read some of these posts. Also, unsurprisingly, multiverse theory very often mentioned together with flat earth. It just shows how ridiculous it is. So back to the question of God. Let's try to use our logic and arrive to conclusion. What kind of God or creator controls this simulation? This diagram is built from many philosophers thinking about God, and if you read books, this is very concise and nice diagram. And what we can see, I will not go through it in detail, but if you go through it in detail, you will arrive to conclusions that God is not perfect, at least God or creator of this current world. If you just apply logic, that is obvious. Now if you go back to the original diagram about versions of gods, we can rule out quite a lot of them. So first of all, let's rule out pantheism because it simply doesn't explain the purpose. It only states that God essentially encompasses the universe, but doesn't really explain purpose in any way. Then we also can remove misotheism or that God is evil because we clearly see there is good in this world too, so that one doesn't belong. Then polytheism can be ruled out as well because it really doesn't matter how many gods there are. Many people, by some reason, think that one god or many gods is a very important question, but to me it's not. And if from a mathematical point of view, you can simply, there is a concept of a group in math, and if you have similar objects, you can group them together, call that group A, and that group will be 1. So if you have equal beings, you can group them and call them 1, and therefore polytheism doesn't really matter. The assumption that you are God can be easily ruled out by this question: why don't you have a clue what is going on? God, by definition, should have understanding of the world, but you don't, so you're not God. Again, all these conclusions are based on logic. We can reduce this further. Concept of semi-good, bad God, or two groups of gods also doesn't matter, again, if we apply the logic, so this is kind of same concept. So we only left with two, the distant God and the semi-God. And we can rule out even the distant God if we ask this question. If God left us alone, then he is not perfect. So this one also ruled out by this. The good, perfect God would not leave Earth, create Earth and leave it for suffering, because there is a lot of evil in this world. So that one also ruled out. So we really left with just this version. The final answer to what kind of version of our simulation is most likely will be given in my final video, which will be one after one more about science that is coming next. That's the video where I will also talk about my book. Thank you.